What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I am here to talk to you today about Yorick, who went to PvE earlier today for me, though when you watch this, maybe it was a couple days or weeks ago or whatever, but we have a Yorick update coming to a League of Legends near you in about a week and a half, and I want to talk about what this project is, what's in it, why I'm hopeful it's going to be good for Yorick and the game overall, and what went into it. So this is a project that I started just kind of on a whim in the middle of January, so about 2-ish months ago, as like, we've had to keep trying to tune Yorick around mostly really, really high, low MMR solo queue win rates, often to the chagrin of high MMR Yorick players, and that feels pretty bad to have a champion that you really love, that you spent hundreds of hours, thousands of hours playing, and, it's being tuned towards some degree of unviability. And I don't think Yorick professes to be such a sort of like easy, straightforward champion where you expect, a larger play rate and more success in lower MMRs, like say a Set or a Garen or something. I don't think Yorick is that kind of a champion, and so it feels bad to me when it's like, oh, this champion is like really, really bound to or really constrained by how successful he is in lower MMRs, and I'd like to flatten that out a little bit, so he can still be successful in lower MMR, it's fine, but like allow him to be meaningfully more successful than he currently is in higher MMRs where the counterplay is like really easily accessed, and a lot of stuff kind of really sucks here. So I'd like to do that a little bit, not flatten it out, not go high elo skewed, whatever, but make it a little bit nicer. Okay, it's a problem to solve. It's not terribly exciting, but heart the right place. Second thing was realize that Yorick is really not a viable team fighter. He's obviously really good at split pushing, he's good at one-on-ones, but he really does not have the tools to team fight very well. There's a lot that goes into it. To be clear, I don't think I fixed everything here. I don't think he's a great team fighter, but the goal was make it better. I think that has landed. I think it's overall going to be a little bit more positive. Also wanted to modernize his kit. There's a couple like random things here, like a lot of this is kind of under the hood, where it'll just be easier to maintain parts of the kit going forward because of random numbers changes. We'll talk about those when we get to them. But also just generally a lot of the rules around how things interact are kind of old, and with the benefit of years of hindsight and years of other game changes, like, well, we can kind of dive in here and clean stuff up and make stuff work a little bit better and make it a little more intuitive. And so these aren't like the most extremely amazing goals ever by any means, but once able to kind of dig into the project, was able to get sort of more concrete stuff and more directly positive things that are there to make Yorick feel better, and start talking about, okay, well, what really is Yorick meant to do? How's it meant to feel? What's meant to be impactful? And I think ultimately landed on a set of changes that is positive, though again, I don't think has solved every problem with Yorick. I think there is still work to be done. However, in terms of time management, in terms of having a lot of other stuff to do, I'm sorry that we couldn't do more here for Yorick players. Again, I think it's a step forward, but there's always more to do in League of Legends, and I'm basically intending to move on and do other stuff here, but I want to get out the door because I think there's some real improvements here. Okay, cool. Let's move forward and talk about what's going on here. Also, I want to give a very big shout out to Riot Phreak and all of the incredible Yorick mains that he reached out to and gave a lot of feedback. He shared a lot of work in progress, changed those with them. They would come back and give information. He'd relay stuff. He did an amazing job of playing telephone for us and being a really good touch point there. So shout out everyone who gave feedback. Again, shout out to Phreak for being really awesome here. The hope is that we land something that is good for Yorick players, that Yorick players are happy about, and that make him feel better as a champion. Now, will there be balance problems? Likely. That's pretty possible. As we just saw from Nefiri, Gwen, and Singe, they all landed OP. I would like to not land significantly OP here, but if we get it wrong, I'm sorry. If we have the micro patch, we will. If it's overtuned, undertuned, we'll fix it, in the coming up patch, whatever. But the goal is to make something that's good for Yorick players that after balance updates is still a positive experience for the champion. All right, so broad strokes, what's actually happening? Number one is more Mistwalkers. That's like the simplest way to say it is he's going to be able to summon them way more often, way more frequently. He will have his ghoul army way more often than before. The Mistwalkers themselves are going to be tankier sometimes and squishier in others. I want to point out that current Mistwalkers, functionally on live right now, don't have a real health bar in, I think, literally any individual interaction. And that's changing to them having a real health bar in more interactions. We'll talk about that later. But they are going to generally deal less damage. Yorick's damage output is going to be less about long-range fire and forget damage. It's going to be a little bit less about his minions. On a per minion basis, he will, again, generally have more minions. He will be himself more powerful, but he will have more Mistwalkers. They're going to be tankier sometimes, squishier others, and they're going to generally deal less damage. One big thing that I think is really important is level 1 to 6 is substantially better. It maybe needs to be buffed by more than it currently is, and we didn't go hard enough here. This is one of the later things that kind of went in to make his 1 to 5 like feel like it's real, his 1 to 6 feel like it's real, and the fact that he's maybe able to fight for himself in the lane. Hopefully it's, you know, at least a little bit better here and is going to be felt. Late game is going to be generally worse. This is mostly through Mistwalker scaling. His late game isn't really much worse from a personal kit perspective, but in terms of the actual power of Mistwalkers, that's going to be pretty definitive here, that it's going to be worse in the late game. But a big thing is that Yorick is more self-reliant. Obviously, he still wants his Mistwalkers. They're still a meaningful part of his power budget. He cares about Maiden. Like, yes, he's still a Minion Mancer, and that is still going to be true. The degree to which it's true, I guess, is slightly lower, but not by a huge degree. But the big thing is that he has a lot more self-reliance in summoning those minions and getting those units out, and less about having to be in a minion lane, in a minion wave, in a lane to get those things out. So, should be a pretty meaningful upgrade there. Overall, this is a lot of power in general. The things we've talked about so far is win rate positive, I'm pretty confident in. And so E and R both as standalone spells are going to become a little bit weaker. The current numbers on PvE are not up to date anymore. I've already submitted some new changes. There's probably some more changes to do around the R as well. I think the number's probably still a bit too high. But E and R both as standalone spells are generally going to be weaker. That's the compensation for everything else getting stronger, of course. There's some future proofing to mini calculations. Basically, it's the way I view it is if your ability already has level scaling on it, it shouldn't be using total attack damage or max health as the modifier there, because at the end of the day, level scaling already does that, right? If you have a total AD ratio and a level scaler, you basically just made an obfuscated level scaler plus bonus AD ratio, because you leveling up gives you more base attack damage, aka influencing the total AD ratio. So why is there level scaling and this? This is, you know, compared to say like Garen Q or Yorick Q or Darius W, where it's like it's total AD ratio and like a base damage or something where it's like, yeah, the ranks matter some amount, and then like it scales with my champion because total AD is just like a very kind of clean, like easy to use. But if you're gonna, you know, look at Mistwalkers or Maiden or anything like this and be like, it has 0 base damage, 50% of your total AD, it's like, why? Those feel kind of weird. Ult specifically, I don't think always need total AD ratios in a lot of cases because they are ranked so consistently, right? 6, 11, 16. They functionally scale throughout the game really cleanly anyway. So you don't need to massage it in the middle there. I think Wukong R is okay. I'm going way too into the weeds here. These don't really matter. The big thing is basically why this is good, especially for things like, let's say, the Mistwalkers, is by changing from total AD or max health to bonus AD and bonus health and a different level scaling paradigm is now you don't get tankier or more damaging Mistwalkers just by changing Yorick's base stats. Like if Yorick is too tanky or not tanky enough or does too much auto attack damage, you don't suddenly collateral the minions by changing a champion's base stats. It makes those tweaks more impactful. It means if you're trying to do things really zero sum and keep things equal, you'd be like, oh, I changed Yorick's AD growth, so I've got to go back and change the level scaling on like Mistwalker AD. And like that's not good for future proofing, right? If you have a goal in mind of how much damage things do, you can just have that and be like, actually, you know, I want Yorick to buy more longswords. Okay, well the AD ratio goes up. Well, that increases the base damage. It's a total AD ratio. Like that gets messy and funky and kind of annoying. So unwinding that some, right? Okay, that's the point. That's the concise version. I went kind of long, sorry. W has literally 0 changes. I did try some changes. We reverted them, but yeah. So W has no changes, XD. I tried a version where it was untargetable. I lowered the duration as like before you even posted a version, I tested a version that was like half the duration but untargetable, so you couldn't break the wall. You were just stuck in the circle for 2 seconds or whatever. Ultimately, the primary feedback was, so I was initially worried about how long duration was allowed to be because it's not tenacityable. Yeah, something's going to jump out of the wall, of course, but it was like, well, you can't break it anymore. So, wow, I'm really worried about like the max CC duration where you can't cleanse, you can't use tenacity, whatever else. Like some champs are just screwed here, like Vayne, can't leave. She's just there until she decides that she's dead. And I was like kind of worried about that. So I like dropped the duration a fair bit. And a lot of Yorick players were like, I'm worried about this actually being good for my champion. I was like, you know what? It's not worth it. Let's just kick it down the line, whatever, we're going to be done here. I do want to point out one thing randomly as well, which is there's actually a month here where I had no active development here. Again, I started the project in January. By mid-February, I had a few iterations in, and then got immediately busy doing things like anti-lane swap for a stand, and just other stuff kind of really came up and took a lot of my time. So there was a full month where just nothing happened, and then picked it back up sort of towards the beginning of March and was like, I can probably get this over the line. Let me cut things that aren't working. And because like there are parts here that I know are testing well, that have received good feedback. And so because we've already started this dialogue and there's parts that I know people are looking forward to, let's get this done. And so I spent like actual dedicated time on this for like the last 2 weeks while juggling other projects, and was like, okay, let's cut this down to the parts that work. Let's ship it. Let's go. And so just scrap the W's, like, yeah, maybe there's something here, but let's just move on. Okay, so let's talk about in detail the idea that there are more weaker Mistwalkers. So the big thing is the passive grave generation timing. Now, maybe this is not the right actual numbers for like long-term correct for Yorick, but it was pretty easy to do. I mean, it's very, very easy to do and seemed directionally correct. So instead of getting 1 grave every 12 minions until level 7, where it's 1 grave every 6 minions, until level 13, where it's 1 grave every other minion, it starts at 8, and then at level 3 it's 7, at level 5 it's 6, right? So at level 5, it's 6 instead of 12. It's a really big deal. Level 5 Yorick gets twice as many graves. Pretty good. At level 7, 5 instead of 6. Cool. At level 9, 4 instead of 6. Meaningful upgrade. At level 11, 3 instead of 6. Again, twice as many. Sweet. And then at level 13, same breakpoint of every other corpse, right? Okay, cool. So generally, there's going to be more corpses on the ground, more graves, more Mistwalkers, wonderful stuff, literally strict buff, and especially very early game seed, right? Especially in the 1-6 case where Yorick really sucks right now. Okay, biggest change of the entire change list right here. Q spawns a grave if you simply hit a champion or large monster. So it's not just last hit, it's just bonk a champion, get a thing. I think there is real thoughts you can sort of have around stacking paradigms and instead of hitting champions and instead of hitting minions and whatnot. I think for the case of Yorick Q, where you are like using this consumable, like this cooldown and this mana to create a grave, I think asking for a timing test or a skill test there, very, very reasonable. Asking to put it on cooldown so that you have a window. Oh, it's on cooldown, go trade. I think those are really positive things, right? I think that is a way to create good gameplay in League of Legends, is to ask them to put something on cooldown and then fight them when it's down. I think that's great. NEQ lightly does this. Yorick Q obviously does this. Nasu clearly does this. Renekton healing off the wave from his Q and then being like, well, let's go. There's downtime here, right? He probably burned Fury to get that health back. Like, these are all positive things, right? These are beneficial. But to say, hey, Yorick, you're allowed to queue the enemy champion and not penalize yourself for trading back, I think that's a positive. I think that's just good for the champion. I think it's a more modern take on a spell like this. I think it is just like correct for Yorick and correct for League that he can just bonk a champion and spawn a grave for doing so. He has a skill test of time to last hit against a minion. He has a skill test if I got to hit a champion, take a trade. Positive up there. So Yorick is more incentive to just fight. He has the tools to just fight, and he can fight and not hold himself back because he's no longer, missing out on graves. That, by the way, he literally can't spawn until, again, it would take, if you don't last it with Q, it would take you 6 minion waves to be able to spawn a grave. Or sorry, to be able to spawn Mistwalkers with just Q. Obviously you can E and then, it'll summon things from graves, but like, yes, of course you're gonna last it with Q sometimes. I understand, but like, damn, like that's rough, right? So this is here. Next thing though is because you have way more graves passively and meaningfully more graves on champion and large monster hit. Also, the cooldown's down by 1 second at rank 1, so that impacts this as well. The actual attack damage of Mistwalkers. Now this is actually prorating out his base AD, that's a total AD ratio, plus the base damages, means the actual attack damage of Mistwalkers is 16.6 to 119.4, plus 20% bonus AD. Now this scaling here is incredibly sharp. It's 1 per level baseline plus 20% of his total AD, which is like way less than 1 per level there as well. Which means like at level 1, technically old Mistwalkers have more attack damage than new Mistwalkers, but like at level 2, 3, 4, 5, when it's plus 1 per level and it's basically a flat line, new is better, right? So actual attack damage per Mistwalker, straight up better in practical situations in the early laning phase. 1 to 7, 1 to 8 around there, 2 to 8 around there. Again, bonus AD ratio is the same. The incentive to build longswords, that is unchanged for this. But obviously, once you get later onto the game, level 9, etc., the really late game, pure level scaling stuff, well, that's a lot softer. This is just like, this is functionally treated as stat growth. It's, 15 to 75 as though it was like AD plus AD growth. Whereas this was like very strongly like it's linear here, then it's linear like this, then it's linear like that, right? So again, better in actual practice in the early mid game, definitively worse in the later game. Next thing is attack speed. Certainly, this is generally going to be lower attack speed for Mistwalkers. It was a flat 8 attack speed per level, full stop. Now it's Yorick's bonus AS, and this will count runes. This does count early items, so you get a stat shard, bam, there's some attack speed. You go Legend Alacrity, bam, there's some attack speed. Again, this is not better than Live. This is a nerf. Full stop. Um, my anticipation of his actual build and runes and whatnot, especially if you're going top lane where you are starting attack speed shard typically, this does tend to be, combined with this, still DPS pretty neutral for the early to mid game, but definitively ghouls are dealing less damage late. That is true. Like, they are dealing less damage, okay? He gets more ghouls, and again, they're like treading water to slightly better in some cases in the early mid game. So, you know, the throughput for laning phase is better, but late game it's just worse. Aside from being able to like actually spawn ghouls by bonking in team fights, maybe a bit of a trade there regardless. Okay, next change is the functional health. Now again, old ghouls had linear health scaling from like 100, like 110 to 202, plus 20% of Yorick's max HP, which maths out to being this. I think I rounded it, but it's basically this. With a 20% bonus health ratio after doing this prorating. The health bar is roughly cut in half, right? 240 becomes 110, 730 becomes 400. The health scaling is down by 25% from 0.2 to 0.15. So ghouls are, well, Mistwalkers are like clearly weaker, right? They have roughly half the health bar they used to. That's a pretty big deal. Okay, whoa. What's going on here? Well, there's a lot of rules. And I mentioned modernization. I tried to be very intentional around what the actual rules are around Mistwalker health to try to create things that are fair to Yorick and things that are fair to his opponents. I'm not sure these numbers are exactly perfectly correct. We did a lot of Singed playtests because we shipped Singed last patch, so Singed was often in the games because we were playtesting them at the same time. And like, honestly, these Mistwalkers die to Singed Q pretty fast. There are some champs that like, kind of crush these things. The fact that they have half the health means they're dying to things like Singed Q. But okay, well, the old rules was this health bar was always fake. They were hard one-shot by any auto attack or single target spell or turret. That's still true though. They took half damage from AoE. They took half damage from monsters. So technically, lane minions would deal full damage, but any monster dealt half damage. Any champion interaction either dealt half damage or one-shot it. I guess maybe like Tiamat Splash would do exactly full damage. But I want to point out, right, like let's think about a level 18 Yorick. All right, I'm level 18 Yorick. My ghouls, let's say if I have like a 1,000 bonus health, which is like pretty normal. Okay, my ghouls have like 900 and whatever health on them, right? Wow, that's a pretty big health bar. It's better than a lane minion. That's a big health bar, 900 health. Okay, Lulu right-clicked it, it's dead. Okay, well, it's not 900 health. All right, Irelia Q'd it, it's dead. Well, that's not 900 health either. Okay, Aatrox used Q. Oh, this thing has actually 1,800 health against Aatrox Q. And it's minion modded, because it's Aatrox Q. Okay, it's invincible. If you right-clicks it, it gets one shot, not a health bar. Use a spell on it, like, these would tank Crowstorm. Fiddlesticks ult in a team fight, they would live. That's not a real health bar, right? And so basically the way I viewed it is kind of at no point in time did his Mistwalkers have a real health bar. And so again, I'm pretty sure that like there was some mistakes here in tuning because we're going from not having a real health bar in any interactions to having a real health bar in almost all interactions. So the new rules are that melee attacks deal double damage. Now, to be clear, Irelia Q still kills these. Basically, if you are a champion who is melee and builds longswords, in most cases, you will still one-shot these ghouls with a right-click. Because, right, 400 total health at level 18. Okay, sure, call it 550 because of this. All right, if they have 275 AD, they one-shot them. That's a bit of a stretch. Irelia Q still does it, but, like, okay, less so. Again, if you're a longsword building melee champion, you're probably one-shotting in a lot of cases here. I'm expecting that, actually. But ranged champions, I'm targeting 2 to 3 autos. Obviously, if you're, like, Aurelian Soul, your right-clicks are not dealing... You're not doing 400 auto-attack damage forever. Of course, you've got spells, no big deal. And hey, their health bar is half the size it was before, so it's going to be decent. Damage taken from AoE actually being somewhat scaled here. So early game, they're taking 2/3 damage from AoE. Level 14 is the breakpoint this stops at. They take 40% damage from AoE. So yeah, the health bar is cut in half, but the AoE damage taken is cut by 20%. This basically, the reason this is here is very early on, I think it is reasonable that Singed can sometimes kill ghouls, that champs can sometimes kill ghouls, that these things die once in a while, right? But when you get to mid-game, you get level 14 plus, you get to actual team fights, okay, 400 health bar, and only taking 400 damage, 40% AoE, okay, tank 1,000 AoE damage. Okay, well, like, Tibbers got dropped in the team fight and Annie pressed W, that's like, you're getting close to 1,000 damage out there. She doesn't quite one-shot the ghouls, but like, we're kind of getting there, right? Ancillary AoE damage will probably wear these things down, where they will probably die eventually, but like not instantly. But they're going to be like kind of low, and so someone can right-click them and they can get killed, and like they will die sometimes. And the goal is like ghouls sometimes die is the intended tuning. I'm again not saying that number is perfect. I'm pretty sure I didn't, but that is kind of the point here, is that they sometimes die, and that it feels okay to kill them. It feels like they live long, that you feel okay. And also, because you're spawning Graves proactively much more often, it is very much intended that ghouls die and get resummoned, and they die and get resummoned, and they die and get resummoned. That is an intended loop here where they die and get resummoned. So that's really, really trying to be the point here to make this happen. And if we get things wrong, we can move things around, we can push cooldowns, we can do other kind of stuff here, but that is the goal, right, in terms of how they're going to actually interact. The final change is cleaning up some of the other mods here, 50% from non-epic non-champions. So this means, right, old ghouls had 730 health, or whatever, 900 health, whatever, and took half damage from monsters, so they had 800 health against Baron, which means ghouls were invincible to epic monsters. Now, generally speaking, we don't like when mini summons can functionally infinitely tank an epic monster. I think that's kind of not cool. So again, the health bar is roughly cut in half, and they don't take half damage from Baron anymore, which means ghouls, Mistwalkers, take 4 times as much damage from Rift Herald, Void Grubs, not that's going to matter, Baron, Dragon, etc. Now, are they still going to be really tanky? Yeah, this is still 400 health with 50% bonus HP. So again, call it 550. 550 health takes a while. And keep in mind, you can, every Q bonk, you summon a Grave. You summon a Grave, you summon a Grave. They'll die, you'll replace them. They'll die, you replace them. Not a huge deal. Keep in mind that, like, your E mark, right, spawns ghouls from nearby graves. Okay, I put E on Baron, I bonk it, summons a ghoul. I bonk it, summons a ghoul, right? They will die and come back. It's going to make them worse at soloing stuff, but sure, fair enough. Now, in terms of the monster interaction, okay, well, health bar, again, half as much. It is going to be a little bit harder for Yorick to, like, leave his ghouls in the camp and walk away. They have half the health. Also, once you're in, like, mid to late game, they do less damage. So they're not going to be as good at killing the camp off, right? For lane minions, again, half the health, but now they take half damage from lane minions, so pretty equal there in terms of that. Again, turret still one-shots, all that stuff's the same. So that's the whole rundown on the rules changes of Mistwalkers, right? Trying to modernize, trying to make the health bars actually real in each of these interactions. Trying to make them real in these interactions, right? That's the point there. And if one price is off a little bit, the melee autos is too severe, not severe enough, okay, fine. Overall too tanky, easy to retune, cool, right? Easy stuff there. All right, moving on. Next big bucket of changes is increased self-reliance and better team fighting. So really simple, 10% total AD on Q. There was a while I was testing. I basically replaced the damage on Yorick Q and made it Alawi W, and was like, here's a max health damage on next hit with a total AD ratio for the max health damage. And I mean, obviously, like, Alawi W does actually way more damage per swing than Yorick Q. This actually made him worse 1 to 6 because 4% max health is actually not as good as this in a lot of cases. But it meant that his, like, mid to late game was, like, trucking people. You're doing, like, 10% max health with an armor shred on the kit, and just, like, he was really crushing people and was, like, way OP. And again, I mentioned this earlier, limited time overall to do the design work. Got to the point where he was definitely OP, and I'm like, look, having max health here somewhere would be pretty nice, but, like, the amount of retuning needed to make this a reality, not really gonna be possible. So let's cut this down. Let's go back. Okay, Yorick's late game kind of sucks. He, can't really use his own leads all as well as we would like. Okay, 20% total AD ratio. Here's the buff. Here you go. Congratulations. Have fun, buddy. Go. So yeah, it's not very exciting, but it's there. Again, early landing power, levels 1 through 8. You have a lower Q cooldown. Congratulations. You can fight back. Again, does more damage. It's a total AD ratio, so it's better at level 1. This is, 7 damage, which is, like, not bad. At level 1, it's, 20, 24 damage, something around there. Late game, 1 through 8, again, 1 second lower cooldown. Well, quarter second lower cooldown at level 8 here, but, decent improvement there. So better self-reliance, better 1 through 6. Okay, great. Changing the E rules. So the E is much better for Yorick. Instead of giving Yorick 20% move speed, it gives Yorick 30% move speed, and it shreds armor for 4 seconds. And so he's going to deal more damage to his primary target. This is his primary target agnosticism lever. Primary target agnosticism lever is I have percent armor shreds when you build armor against me. And Yorick, even though he has some magic damage, don't get me wrong, Maiden is magic damage, E is magic damage, that's going down this match. And even then, like, currently it's still, like, only about a third of its damage. He is still primarily physical damage here. And so armor shred is still the primary mechanic here. It's still the primary important lever here. And hey, a 30% armor shred on the ability you're likely to max second, going to be meaningful, going to be impactful. It's going to matter here. And so he can use this to say, well, I'm going to run up to you. I'm going to catch you. This buff, right? This stuff is tied to the 4-second long buff. The slow is the 2-second long buff. This is the 4-second long buff. So the move speed, the armor shred, that's for 4 seconds. So throw it. I'm going to get into range. I'm going to bonk you at least once. The bonk does more damage. The bonk does more damage. The bonk summons a ghoul. which gets immediately summoned because the E is on. That loop is a lot stronger. And so he actually has ghouls as part of his bonk loop, and the E and the bonk and all that stuff. So large improvement here for what Yorick can do for himself, so that he doesn't have to always have Mistwalkers around to do his job. I'm not saying he's going to be the sickest guy. He's not going to do Darius level things, but like, it's better. It's an improvement, right? E for Mistwalkers, well, again, they're getting that same move speed bump from 20% to 30%, but we're taking away the 20% Mistwalker damage amp, and instead, well, because they do physical damage, it's an armor shred. Now, mathematically, this is weaker, right? 30%, 18 to 30% armor shred is weaker than 20% damage amp. So in terms of throwing E at somebody and them dealing damage, that's weaker. Right? If Mistwalkers do slightly more damage early game and you summon a bit more of them, okay, fine, but you land E on them and it's going to be less impactful. The E harass is going to be worse because the ghouls are just not going to do as much damage when they land on your opponent. That's just going to be true. Is what it is. All right, next thing. Miscellaneous balance changes, because we're mostly done with like the big things, right? We said Yorick is better at doing his thing. His QE has a real loop. He's got more Mistwalkers. He can replace them more easily. And as of Thursday afternoon, I met with Phreak and was like, yo, okay, we're positive on direction. We think we're doing the right things. That's great. Give me your gut check. What is the tuning state here? How overpowered are we? Because he's in those playtests with the rest of gameplay analysis, right? He's in those games a lot more than I am. He's the guy for the balance read, and he's like, I think it's about between 3 and 5% overpowered. It's like, okay, well, I need to pull a lot of win rate then out of this change. Let's go. So the first thing is armor growth. I've mentioned this a few times. I'm trying to slowly pull armor growth out of the game overall. You can find another video about that for why, but basically I think long-term for League of Legends, pulling somewhere around 0.7 armor growth off every champ in the game over the course of the next few years, I think is correct for the game overall. So whenever I have room to do that and it like makes sense within the class and the current state of stats and whatnot, move in that direction. TLDR, make items like LDR and lethality make more sense in the ecosystem when armors don't get to 120 typically late game. We get a better sort of world for how stats actually work out when they're in a more normal space. E damage is getting nerfed. Right, this is to make room for everything else. This has already been nerfed, by the way, but like this was one of the nerfs that was like, hey, get the 4% win rate. This has been in there for a long time. Just stripped the current health damage off the E and said it's just a weak spell. I bumped the AP ratio here. It doesn't really matter. It's from 0.7 to a 1.0 AP ratio. It's his only AP ratio on the kit. It's not important here, but it's like, it's just there. Here, have fun, buddy. You get a Baron buff. Your E does more damage. Congratulations. Who cares? But basically, just set the total damage of the spell to the old minimum. E as harass, I think, is just kind of not a very compelling pattern. I'd rather that power be somewhere else. If he's weak because of how much damage this takes away, great, we can buff him. That's not a big problem. I'm happy to give him power elsewhere. Not a big deal, but this just felt like the wrong place to have a spell that deals 300 damage occasionally. It just seemed incorrect to me, and so pulled this down. R damage, because Maiden is a total AD ratio plus a flat amount. Rank 1 Maiden did 41 to 50, and then 63 to 74 at rank 2, and then 107 to 114 at rank 3, within 50% of any further bonus attack damage, so Conqueror, Longswords, what have you. That has changed to these numbers. These are not the ones on PvE, but the ones that are going in right now. This probably still should go even a little bit lower, although the fact that, once he's level 6, he probably has, he's got the stat shard, he's going to get Conqueror stacks, he's going to build some longswords for his Trinity Force or Cleaver or whatever. So just, trying to pull down the damage here. This is still actually a pretty aggressive AD ratio, all things considered, for this, thing basically being fire and forget and dealing much of free damage on its own. The mark is going to end up being unchanged. I was trying to preserve some of Yorick's max health damage here, since it got pulled away from the E, for example, to say, okay, well, since Yorick is a juggernaut, we're not really getting all the way to Yorick is a great juggernaut. He doesn't really have all the things you would need to really function that well as a frontliner, but we can make some improvements here by, keeping at least, the max health damage in this one, the sustained damage, the ability to hit frontline since he can't reach backline at all. And again, Maiden, this is like mostly here for a cleanup thing where now if you change Yorick's base stats for some reason, you don't arbitrarily change the damage of his ultimate. It's now bespoke in its own thing. Also makes the tooltip not look really silly, where it's like rank 1 of my R has 0 damage. What? Like really minor stuff there. As mentioned, it's actually not even or one other change is the R health is the same thing. Maiden is 60% of Yorick's total health plus some number. It's now a different number, and 60% of Yorick's bonus health. Mathematically, it's functionally identical to live. It's within like 3% at all levels. Like it's not a real change. But again, it's cleanliness. If we ever change Yorick's stats, we don't randomly make Maiden tankier, right? Or weaker or whatever. It's just kind of free real estate there. Not a really big problem. That's just clean up under the hood. It's not meant to be a real balance change. Again, this is like relatively close to the live balance of the champion, considering the bonus AD ratio, but maybe should go down a little bit, whatever. Okay, now we're on to individual like QOL lines. Mistwalkers don't recall if they're fighting monsters. So the way it works under the hood is when Mistwalkers attack something, they put a buff on themselves or remove that buff based on where they are. It literally, the scripting says when you land on attack, ask the game server, is my target in a lane right now? And it's like literally like physically on the map, are they in a lane right now? And if they are in a lane, it says, oh, you're hitting a thing in the lane. Good to know. I am in combat. I forget what it's actually called, but it's like whatever. We're just gonna call it in combat. All right. Well, if they're in combat, they will ignore. They will have their own AI. Okay, they will like push down lanes on their own. Right. They will walk and do this thing. And they will auto push. They will follow Maiden, etc. And they will also ignore Yorick recalling, which is why Yorick can like start a wave push, summon Maiden, and then recall, and then off they go. Right. When you recast Maiden, right, it puts her as like in combat, and she'll go find the nearest lane, walk to it, and ignore recalls, right? The in combat buff is basically a marker so that the AI scripts do things and recall ignores them, right? Okay, great. And then if they hit something that is not in a lane, it removes the buff. Just be like, oh, I hit a champion in the river. Remove the buff. I must follow Yorick now, right? I hit a jungle monster. I'm not in a lane. I must follow Yorick now. And so they immediately would do that, right? And yeah, they would stay in combat there in combat, but then they immediately go chase you down because they don't have the buff anymore. So what I did is I added some new logic to say, well, if follow most that logic, but if what you are hitting is a monster, put the buff on for like 3 seconds. And they attack more than, once every 3 seconds, so they're going to keep this on permanently while they're attacking stuff, right? What that means is if you send your ghouls after red or blue buff and then recall, they'll just finish red or blue buff. And so that's, a pretty strong jungle opposition, of course. But yeah, you get to do the thing that all the other pet champs do, which is summon Zyra plants and then hit B and the camp dies. I think that is reasonable to give that to Yorick. Now, again, I don't think Yorick should go turn kill red buff into recall into the auto push bot lane for him. That's kind of extreme. That's too much. That's, I think, kind of not cool. You can turn that into, stealing from your teammates or whatever. So it's only 3 seconds long. Basically, they finish the hit. 3 seconds ticks down, and they're like, oh, right, I'm Yorick's pet, and runs across the map to go find him. But they'll finish the camps for you. Next thing I added, this is actually pretty easy. Once I knew what the tech was, I just looked up, I copied Senna, and then changed all the logic to make sense for Yorick. Yorick can now ping his passive to count ghouls. So I'm actually pretty happy with the choice here, which is when you ping Yorick passive, it says, I have X ghouls nearby and Y ghouls on the map. Now, is a experienced Yorick player going to spam this? Maybe. What it means is if you're fucking cool at Yorick and you send Maiden top lane and you start red buff and you press E and you send some ghouls over there and then you run into mid lane and do some stuff, you'd be like, I have 12 ghouls on the map. What's up? Like if you get your sick tri-lane push going, you can ping and be like, I got 4 nearby, but I got 16 on the map. How's it going, everyone? I think it's gonna be fun. Like I'm hoping that Yorick players are going to enjoy that. I'm actually really pleased with that one. I think it's gonna read as fun and enjoyable and like it's just like nice little cute point for Yorick players. No power impact whatsoever, right? But it's just like, hey, you ping it and you can tell your team I've got 16 goals on the map. I did it. Hopefully you enjoy that. Otherwise, a couple of bug fixes. The way the damage is scripted on the ghoul leap is getting changed. Now this means individual leaps will stack Black Cleaver individually. Obviously Pet Champs is really good at stacking things like Cleaver. There's going to be no exception. Their basic attacks already did this, but now the leaps will individually, so you won't get 1 stack off Cleaver, you will get 4. Obviously it means you just kind of instant stack Cleaver. Is what it is. He's a pet champion, kind of goes this way. Minor buff there, but it is like the primary item that Jungle Yorick builds. And then I fixed the E leap not going through terrain. So this under the hood is actually just changing the specific bit of scripting used for leap architecture. This ends up actually copying Nefiri Dogs. What I actually copied was Lee Sin Q, but it's all the same tech under the hood. It went from move to location to move to unit. It's functionally the tech here. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, because I'm not a tech designer or anything. I haven't looked at the code. I wouldn't know what it was doing even if I could. Move to location will often fail when the location is very close to a wall. And I tried a lot of things. Like I tried okay, make the ring gigantic. Make this like gigantic radius you could land. You could wind up here and then move to that location. And I tested like in the middle of mid lane. I was like, yep, you flew 500 meters over to that side. And then I put LeBlanc against a wall and try to leap and then go, can't do it. It's like, but you could have chosen any location in this giant space. Like, no, can't do it. I had a bunch of different versions of this. None of them worked. I was like, okay, well, whatever. Well, Lee Sin and Jackson Co work. So what do you do here? I was like, oh, this is different. You just use a different block. You just say move to unit instead. And move to unit follows under walls, no problem. The one downside here is you can't create the same variance in location with move to unit that you can at other things. So for the queue that, right, the corpse spawning that added to the queue, and the way that the old leap logic worked basically is it would create a circle, functionally create a circle around the champion, and you set like a minimum maximum radius, and it'd be like pick a random point around here and then wind up there. This allowed when you like send 4 ghouls that they would like show up with like a bit of a spread, and it's like more visually appealing because they're like not perfectly coordinated, and they don't like stand on top of one another. It looks better. Just outright looks better. Move to unit can't give you variance. You can say, hey, don't stand on the person. You'll go 50, 100, whatever units back. But at the end of the day, if I have 2 Mistwalkers that are in a line and I say go, they will be literally on top of one another. They will literally be, you can't see more than one model. You will see exactly one model. Now, thankfully, most things move around, and Mistwalkers, when they're in an idle state, natively try to spread themselves apart. But it means there's like little small art quality hit where if you're for some reason a target dummy, they will converge toward a single point, but unless they're like on the same line, they won't fully converge because they're coming this way and then stopping short, and so they'll just be close together, but they won't be on top of one another. Very minor thing here, but that is real. So though, leap to unit seems to pretty much completely get rid of that bug, so congratulations. If someone's by a wall and you land E, ghouls are going to make it. They already dealt the damage. That was already true. When their dash ends, they would deal the damage. That's still going to be there, but at least they can do follow-up auto attacks now. It'd be a little bit nicer there. Did some like minor adjustments to like how the dash speed is calculated. It's not going to really do anything. Dash speed and how high they go, like visually, like I just kind of picked new numbers because like it's a new block. You have to put new things in. It's gonna be very similar to life, but like, hey, by the way, you might see them visually like a little bit different on the dash. And that's it. That's the Yorick update. I really hope you all enjoy this. It is meant to be for Yorick players. Again, trying to fix the fact that he super can't team fight. He's still gonna be better at split pushing probably, but it'll be better. Fix or at least make him better when he doesn't already have an army, so he can like walk up and bonk and like do something there. Selfishly use the E for his own damage, use the Q and E and like summon some ghouls, Mistwalkers immediately in a combo, in a fight. Help his team out, right? He's got the same potency slow, but he can shred armor for his team. They can go carry these things down. It's very common for us to give fighters some kind of team-wide buff that they can use themselves. It's why Cleaver is such a good item design. I really love Black Cleaver because it's like, well, I'm happy with Cleaver, and so is my team. I am a champion that's normally very bad at team fighting. Well, I have an output that is team fight centric because I give other teammates damage. I love mechanics like that. That's why this is red here. All that kind of fun stuff there. Darius's E stun, for example, like it's a really good CC. My teammates like that CC. Minor step there, but it's useful, right? And yeah, I hope this is fun for Yorick players. I really hope you all enjoy it. Probably going to be some tuning passes on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday before this all goes live. If we get it wrong, we'll do, of course, tuning passes needed, but that's the update. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.